just before delving into a new earth and continuing the reading, just wanted to touch upon the notion of gentleness in this practice, in this journey. There may be a lot of different waves of momentum when you first come into this knowing of these understandings and practices. There may be a lot of vigor, a lot of momentum, a lot of motivation to read, to watch, to go deeper as quickly as possible. At times there may be what can feel like going backwards, more obscurity. What was once clear is now utterly unclear. There is refinement that takes place, then more obscurity, confusion even. In all of these waves, all of these flows, one moment you're feeling you can taste it more, the liberation, freedom, awakening, and the next moment you may feel dejected that you're miles away from the place you were a short time ago, and that it's slipping away again and you're going back into mind. All of these movements. But gentleness can be there throughout. And you can take much from that. Even this path it takes away the sharpness, the importance even of progress. I'm finding with myself that gentleness is an aid at the moment, at a time when things may for me seem more obscure, more in mind, that it feels harder to be present, or the clarity of presence is now blurred. And so gentleness is a very supportive approach. It's a compassionate one as well. We can often be very rough with ourselves in our approach, aggressive even. We may analyze things, we may try to gain depth forcibly. And gentleness just gives a bit of pause in that going forward momentum. There's a visual that comes to mind. I think it was Dr. Wayne Dyer talked about in order to allow water to come into your hand, you can't grab at water. You almost surrender to it. You place your hand and allow the water to come into your hand, and you gradually cup your hand, allow the water to take shape of the hand, to fill the hand, and then you gently remove it. And it's almost taking that approach with this path, with becoming present and spacious. You're not kind of going into gear and slamming the accelerator of presence. At times you may feel there's a lot of momentum and energy there, a lot of passion and depth, and that's fine too. But it doesn't always have to be in this one way. And with gentleness, it's just very, very subtly in this moment, just allowing the moment to almost fall on you, to go through you. You're not, in a sense, you're not trying to be present, you're not trying to do anything, but just be. And I find that helpful as of late. I've been struggling with my mental health, and today there's just been that reminder of gentleness throughout the day. Even while I've been watching, watching television or reading, there's been just moments of just, between episodes, just pause and just allow what is. Even allow the non-presence, the covering up of presence, or the ever so subtle space that was once so clear to you. Just allow that, for it not to be clear. Allow for the not knowing, the not understanding of things. Just surrender to that. That things do need to be understood in this moment. I just wanted to begin with that reminder of gentleness. It's almost an ointment, in a remedy in times of fragility, in times of vulnerability, in times of uncertainty, confusion. Then this can be of help in this way. So we've reached the passage titled Pathological Forms of Ego. As we have seen, the ego is in its essential nature pathological, if we use the word in its wider sense to denote dysfunction and suffering. Many mental disorders consist of the same egoic traits that operate in a normal person, except that they have become so pronounced that their pathological nature is now obvious to anyone except the sufferer. For example, many normal people tell certain kinds of lies from time to time in order to appear more important, more special, and to enhance their image in the mind of others, who they know what their achievements, abilities and possessions are, and whatever else the ego uses to identify with. Some people, however, driven by the ego's feeling of insufficiency and its need to have or be more, lie habitually and compulsively. Most of what they tell you about themselves, their story, is a complete fantasy, a fictitious edifice the ego has designed for itself to feel bigger, more special. Their grandiose and inflated self-image can sometimes fool others, but usually not for long. It is then quickly recognized by most people as a complete fiction. The mental illness that is called paranoid schizophrenia, or paranoia for short, is essentially an exaggerated form of ego. It usually consists of fictitious story the mind has invented to make sense of a persistent underlying feeling of fear. The main element of the story is the belief that certain people, sometimes large numbers or almost everyone, are plotting against me or are conspiring to control or kill me. The story often has an inner consistency and logic, so that it sometimes fools others into believing it too. Sometimes organizations or entire nations have paranoid belief systems at their very basis. The ego's fear and distrust of other people, its tendency to emphasize the otherness of others by focusing on their perceived faults and make those faults into their identity, is taken a little further and makes others into inhuman monsters. The ego needs others, but its dilemma is that deep down it hates and fears them. John Paul Sartre's statement, "Hell is other people," is the voice of the ego. The person suffering from paranoia experiences that hell most acutely, but everyone in whom the egoic patterns still operate will feel it to some degree. The stronger the ego in you, the more likely it is that in your perception, other people are the main source of problems in your life. It is also more than likely that you will make life difficult for others. But of course, you won't be able to see that. It is always others who seem to be doing it to you. The mental illness we call paranoia also manifests another symptom that is an element of every ego, although in paranoia it takes on a more extreme form. The more the sufferer sees himself persecuted, spied on, or threatened by others, the more pronounced becomes his sense of being the center of the universe around whom everything revolves, and the more special and important he feels as the imagined focal point of so many people's attention. His sense of being a victim, of being wronged by so many people, makes him feel very special. In the story that forms the basis of his delusional system, he often assigns to himself the role of both victim and potential hero, who is going to save the world or defeat the forces of evil. The collective ego of tribes, nations, and religious organizations also frequently contains a strong element of paranoia, us against the evil others. It is the cause of much human suffering. the Spanish Inquisition, the persecution and burning of heretics and witches, the relations between nations leading up to the First and Second World Wars, communism throughout its history, the Cold War, McCarthyism in America in the 1950s, prolonged violent conflict in the Middle East, are all painful episodes in human history dominated by extreme collective paranoia. The more unconscious individuals, groups or nations are, the more likely it is that egoic pathology will assume the form of physical violence. Violence is a primitive but still very widespread way in which the ego attempts to assert itself, to prove itself and another wrong. With very unconscious people, arguments can easily lead to physical violence. What is an argument? Two or more people express their opinion, and those opinions differ. Each person is so identified with the thoughts that make up their opinion that those thoughts harden into mental positions, which are invested with a sense of self. In other words, identity and thought merge. Once this has happened, when I defend my opinions, thoughts, I feel and act as if I were defending my very self. Unconsciously, I feel and act as if I were fighting for survival, and so my emotions will reflect the unconscious belief. They become turbulent. I am upset, angry, defensive or aggressive. I need to win at all costs, lest I become annihilated. That's the illusion. The ego doesn't know that the mind and mental positions have nothing to do with who you are, because the ego is the unobserved mind itself. In Zen, they say, don't seek the truth, just cease to cherish opinions. What does that mean? Let go of identification with your mind. Who you are beyond the mind then emerges by itself. I think I'm going to leave it there. The next passage is titled Work with and Without Ego. And feeling a little bit tired, so I won't read on anymore, but again, these passages, some of these seem to expand into a wider canvas that Eckhart paints. In this case, very big, issues such as politics, wars, and violence, and again, he's just highlighting the nature of ego, nature of individuals and violence, or the nature of groups and nations equally identified with the ego, and in this aspect he talks about fear in this way and touches upon, it's almost as if they won't admit it, but a lot of the action is taken out of fear. And it goes on to expand with paranoia. That it is an element in every ego, And that can make sense with the ego being individual and always contrasting and comparing to others. There's always more than one at play. With that separation, there's always that not knowing of this other person. Are they there to harm me, or there's a constant fluctuation when you are in identified with ego, with a separate self, us and them, me and you. And it's the root there of all of these problems, and one of them highlights here is paranoia and fear. And just to end by rereading the last passage, in Zen they say, don't seek the truth, just cease to cherish opinions. What does that mean? Let go of identification with your mind. Who you are beyond the mind then emerges by itself. Thank you for joining me for this episode. As always, I wish you well, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.